Did you ever think about those fast food items from the 1970s that are now illegal? Back then, these items filled trays, fueled road trips, and felt like harmless treats families trusted without question. So what hidden dangers were sitting under heat lamps that nobody warned us about? Trans fats in French fries were the golden secret behind every crispy batch that came out of fast food kitchens during the 1970s. The fries tasted incredible, with a richness and crunch that seemed almost magical, and nobody questioned what made them so impossibly delicious. Restaurants fried them in partially hydrogenated vegetable oils because it was cheap, stable, and kept the fryers running smoothly day after day. Families ordered them by the bagful, letting kids reach in during long car rides while grease soaked through the paper. The smell alone could pull you into a parking lot from blocks away. But those oils were doing something far worse than adding calories. Trans fats raised bad cholesterol, lowered good cholesterol, and dramatically increased the risk of heart disease in ways scientists were only beginning to understand. By the time research caught up with the industry, millions of people had already eaten their way through countless servings without a single warning. Regulators eventually stepped in, and today trans fats are banned entirely from restaurant kitchens. What once made fries unforgettable is now considered one of the most dangerous ingredients ever served. Styrofoam clamshell containers were the unmistakable packaging of fast food in the 1970s, snapping shut with a satisfying click that told you dinner was ready to go. Every burger, every fish sandwich, and every pile of hot nuggets came nestled inside that white foam shell, keeping food warm while families drove home or ate in parking lots with the windows rolled down. Kids loved pressing their thumbs into the material and watching the dents stay put, not realizing they were handling something that would never break down. The containers were cheap to produce, incredibly effective at insulation, and everywhere you looked. But styrofoam leached chemicals into hot food, especially when grease and heat combined inside that sealed environment. Studies later revealed that styrene, a compound in the foam, carried real health risks with prolonged exposure. Environmental concerns mounted as landfills overflowed with containers that refused to decompose. Cities began banning them one by one, and today most major chains have abandoned styrofoam entirely. That familiar snap of a clamshell closing is now a sound from a different era, one where convenience outweighed consequences. Lead-soldered soda fountain lines were hidden behind every counter where teenagers poured drinks and families refilled cups during the 1970s. The metal tubing that carried syrup and carbonated water from storage tanks to dispensers was often joined with lead solder, a practice so common that nobody questioned it. Customers stood at self-serve stations, pressing buttons and watching fizzy streams fill their cups, completely unaware that trace amounts of lead were dissolving into every sip. The soft drinks tasted fine, the machines hummed along reliably, and restaurant owners had no reason to suspect anything was wrong. But lead does not belong anywhere near food or drink. Even small exposures can cause neurological damage, developmental delays in children, and long-term health problems that do not show up for years. Once researchers traced contamination back to fountain equipment, regulators moved quickly to ban lead solder from anything touching consumables. Restaurants scrambled to replace tubing, retrofit machines, and prove their systems were safe. Today, the idea of lead leaching into a cup of soda feels unthinkable, but for an entire generation it was simply part of the experience. Monosodium glutamate in kids' meal promotions was one of the food industry's favorite tricks during the 1970s, boosting flavor in ways that made children beg for more. Fast food chains loaded chicken nuggets, flavored fries, and dipping sauces with MSG because it made everything taste richer, saltier, and almost addictive. Parents had no idea that the ingredient their children craved was specifically engineered to trigger intense flavor responses that natural foods could not match. The meals came with toys, cartoons, and colorful packaging that made the whole experience feel innocent and fun. Kids ate eagerly, asking for seconds, while MSG quietly amplified every bite. When researchers began reporting headaches, flushing, and other reactions linked to high MSG consumption, public concern grew rapidly. Parents started reading labels, demanding answers and questioning what exactly was in those happy little boxes. Regulatory pressure mounted, and many chains quietly reduced or removed MSG from their most child-focused offerings. Today, the additive is still legal but heavily scrutinized, and its presence in kids' meals has become far more controversial than anyone imagined decades ago. Beef tallow frying oil gave fast food French fries their legendary taste during the 1970s, creating a flavor so distinctive that people still talk about it with genuine longing. Major chains cooked their fries in rendered beef fat because it produced a crispy exterior, a fluffy interior, and a richness that vegetable oils simply could not replicate. Families drove miles out of their way just for those fries, not knowing that the secret ingredient was animal fat sizzling in massive industrial fryers. The aroma drifted across parking lots, drawing customers in like a siren call that nobody wanted to resist. But as heart disease research advanced, saturated fats became public enemy number one. Health campaigns warned consumers about cholesterol, clogged arteries, and the dangers lurking in their favorite comfort foods. Chains faced mounting pressure to switch to vegetable oils, and one by one they abandoned beef tallow entirely. The fries changed forever, losing that unmistakable depth that had defined them for years. Today, cooking with beef tallow in commercial settings faces heavy restrictions, and the original recipe exists only in memory and nostalgia. BPA-lined drink cups were standard issue at fast food counters throughout the 1970s, holding everything from sodas to milkshakes without anyone questioning what the plastic contained. Bisphenol A was used to harden the cups, make them durable, and prevent cracking under the stress of ice, heat, and constant handling. Customers grabbed these cups by the millions, sipping through straws while chemicals slowly leached into their beverages. Children drank from them at birthday parties, road trips, and countless afternoons spent in sticky booths under fluorescent lights. The cups felt sturdy, convenient, and completely harmless. But BPA mimics estrogen in the body, disrupting hormones in ways that researchers only fully understood decades later. Studies linked it to developmental problems, reproductive issues, and increased cancer risks, especially in young children whose systems were still forming. When the evidence mounted, regulators banned BPA from baby bottles first, then expanded restrictions to other food contact materials. Today, most drink cups proudly advertise themselves as BPA-free, a label that would have meant nothing to families in the 70s. Cyclamate sweeteners in diet drinks lingered on fast food menus during the early 1970s, even after federal regulators had already raised serious concerns. The artificial sweetener had been wildly popular because it tasted closer to sugar than anything else on the market, and diet-conscious customers loved how it let them enjoy sodas without the calories. Fast food chains served cyclamate-sweetened beverages to millions of people who believed they were making a healthier choice. The drinks came in tall cups with refills available, and nobody mentioned that the sweetener inside had been linked to bladder cancer in laboratory studies. The ban officially arrived in 1970, but existing inventory and slow compliance meant cyclamate products remained available far longer than they should have. Families continued ordering diet drinks without realizing the regulatory battle happening behind the scenes. By the time cyclamate finally disappeared from American menus, it had already been consumed by an entire generation of dieters. Today, the sweetener remains banned in the United States, a reminder that not every shortcut to fewer calories comes without a cost. Red dye. Number 2 colored fast food desserts with a brilliant cherry red that made everything look irresistible during the 1970s. Shakes, sundaes, pie fillings, and promotional treats all glowed with that unmistakable hue, catching the eyes of children who pointed at menu boards and begged their parents for something sweet. The dye was everywhere, added to anything that needed a burst of appetizing color, and nobody questioned whether the vibrant shade came from something safe. Families trusted that anything served at a restaurant had been tested, approved, and perfectly fine to eat. But behind the scenes, researchers were discovering troubling links between red dye number 2 and cancer in laboratory animals. The findings sparked public panic, congressional hearings, and eventually a full ban in 1976. Fast food chains scrambled to reformulate their recipes, swapping the familiar red for alternatives that did not carry the same risks. The cherry-colored desserts of the early 70s vanished almost overnight, replaced by versions that looked slightly different but no longer carried a hidden danger in every spoonful. Unpasteurized soft-serve ice cream swirled out of machines at fast food restaurants throughout the 1970s, offering creamy sweetness that families lined up to enjoy. The soft-serve bases were often made with raw dairy products that had not been heat-treated to kill harmful bacteria, and the machines themselves were breeding grounds for contamination if not cleaned obsessively. Kids watched the white ribbons coil into cones, never imagining that the treat they craved could make them sick. Outbreaks of salmonella and listeria traced back to soft-serve machines began making headlines, and health investigators discovered just how dangerous the combination of raw ingredients and inconsistent sanitation could be. Families who had trusted these desserts for years suddenly learned that something so innocent-looking could send them to the hospital. Regulators responded with strict pasteurization requirements and mandatory cleaning schedules that transformed how soft serve was produced and served. Today, every swirl that comes out of a machine has been through safety protocols that simply did not exist when your parents were kids. Sodium nitrite at unregulated levels preserved the bacon, ham, and deli meats served at fast food restaurants during the 1970s, keeping everything pink, fresh-looking, and shelf-stable far longer than nature intended. The preservative prevented bacterial growth and gave cured meats that appetizing color customers expected, but nobody monitored how much was being used. Restaurants piled bacon onto burgers, stuffed sandwiches with processed ham, and served breakfast platters loaded with cured meats that contained concentrations now considered dangerous. Families ate without hesitation, trusting that the food industry knew what it was doing. But sodium nitrite forms compounds called nitrosamines when heated or digested, and those compounds have been linked to increased cancer risk. Once researchers documented the connection, regulators stepped in with strict limits on how much nitrite could be added to any food product. The freewheeling days of unmeasured preservatives ended, replaced by careful formulations and mandatory labeling. Today, the bacon on your breakfast sandwich contains a fraction of what it once did, though the memory of those heavily preserved meats lingers. Chlorofluorocarbon-propelled whipped cream canisters sat behind fast food counters throughout the 1970s, shooting fluffy white peaks onto sundaes and pies with a satisfying hiss. The propellant inside those metal cans worked perfectly, creating light and airy topping that held its shape beautifully. Workers pressed the nozzle dozens of times per shift, releasing tiny bursts of gas that drifted into kitchen air and eventually into the atmosphere. Nobody worried about what happened after the cream landed on the dessert. The cans were convenient, reliable, and everywhere. But chlorofluorocarbons were silently destroying the ozone layer, creating a global environmental crisis that scientists were only beginning to understand. When the connection became clear, regulators moved aggressively to ban CFCs from consumer products, including the whipped cream dispensers that had become standard equipment in every fast food dessert station. Restaurants switched to alternative propellants, and the familiar hiss changed slightly in ways most customers never noticed. Today, those old CFC canisters represent a strange intersection of innocent dessert toppings and planetary damage. Brominated vegetable oil floated invisibly inside the citrus-flavored sodas served at fast food fountains during the 1970s, keeping the fruity flavoring evenly distributed instead of separating. The chemical worked so well that beverage companies used it without hesitation, and customers gulped down orange and lemon-lime drinks by the gallon. Kids ordered refills constantly, never imagining that each sip contained a flame-retardant compound repurposed for the food industry. The drinks tasted bright, refreshing, and perfectly normal. Parents handed them to children at birthday parties and during long summer afternoons spent at plastic tables. But brominated vegetable oil accumulates in fatty tissue, and researchers eventually linked it to thyroid problems and neurological issues. When the evidence mounted, regulators began restricting its use, and major beverage companies quietly reformulated their recipes. Today, most citrus sodas no longer contain the compound, though it took far longer than it should have for the industry to change. Those fizzy orange drinks of the 70s carried a hidden ingredient that nobody thought to question. Saccharin packets without cancer warning labels sat in small glass dispensers on every fast food table during the early 1970s, offered freely to customers who wanted sweetness without sugar. Dieters shook the little pink packets into their coffee and iced tea, believing they had found a guilt-free solution to their cravings. The artificial sweetener had been around for decades, trusted by millions, and nobody imagined that regulators were about to require warning labels on every package. When studies suggested a possible link to bladder cancer in laboratory animals, the government mandated labels that shocked consumers. Suddenly, something that felt harmless came with fine print that made people pause before tearing open the packet. Fast food restaurants continued offering saccharin, but customers now faced an uncomfortable choice with every cup of coffee. The warning labels remained in place for years, creating confusion around a sweetener that many still use daily. Today, the labels are gone after further research softened the concerns. But the memory of that regulatory whiplash lingers as a reminder that approved additives can fall under sudden suspicion. Mechanically separated poultry filled the chicken nuggets and patties served at fast food restaurants during the 1970s, processed through machines that stripped every usable bit of meat from bones under high pressure. The result was a pink slurry that could be shaped, breaded, and fried into forms that children eagerly devoured without asking what was inside. Parents trusted the familiar shapes and golden coating, never imagining the industrial process that created them. The nuggets were cheap, consistent, and perfectly designed for small hands and picky eaters. But mechanically separated meat included tissues and cartilage that would never appear in traditional cuts, and the process raised questions about what exactly counted as chicken. When consumers learned how their favorite nuggets were made, the backlash was swift. Regulators stepped in with labeling requirements, forcing manufacturers to reformulate or face consumer rejection. Today, many chains advertise whole muscle meat in their chicken products, a direct response to the disgust that followed revelations about the pink paste that once defined fast food chicken. Unrefrigerated condiment bars lined the walls of fast food restaurants during the 1970s, offering open containers of ketchup, mustard, relish, and mayonnaise-based sauces that sat at room temperature for hours. Customers grabbed plastic spoons and scooped whatever they wanted onto their trays, dipping fries and spreading sauces without considering how long those containers had been sitting out. The setup seemed generous and convenient, a self-serve approach that let families customize their meals without waiting in line. Nobody wore gloves, nobody monitored temperatures, and nobody worried about the occasional fly that landed on the edge of an open tub. But mayonnaise and other creamy sauces spoil quickly without refrigeration, creating ideal conditions for bacterial growth that could send unsuspecting customers home with food poisoning. Health inspectors eventually cracked down, requiring refrigeration, covered dispensers, and single-serve packets that eliminated the contamination risks. The open condiment bar vanished from fast food restaurants, replaced by squeeze bottles and foil-wrapped portions that felt less generous but were infinitely safer. Raw egg milkshakes blended fresh at the counter were a protein-packed treat that bodybuilders and health enthusiasts ordered at fast food joints during the 1970s. Some restaurants advertised the addition of raw eggs as a nutritional boost, cracking shells directly into the blender alongside ice cream and flavored syrup. Customers watched the process with satisfaction, believing they were getting something extra that set their shake apart from the standard menu offering. The eggs made the texture richer and the drink feel more substantial, a meal replacement disguised as dessert. But raw eggs carry salmonella bacteria that cooking eliminates, and consuming them uncooked posed a genuine risk that most customers never considered. Outbreaks of salmonella linked to raw egg consumption eventually pushed health departments to ban the practice in commercial food service. Restaurants quietly removed the option from their menus, and the raw egg shake became a relic of an era that treated food safety far more casually. Today, the idea of cracking a raw egg into a fast food blender feels genuinely alarming, though it was once considered a healthy upgrade. Alar treated apple products appeared in pies, turnovers, and juice drinks served at fast food restaurants during the 1970s, preserving the fruit and giving it that perfectly red appearance customers expected. Alar was a growth regulator sprayed on apple orchards to keep fruit on the tree longer and maintain uniform ripeness, and it showed up in processed apple products across the food industry. Families ordered apple desserts believing they were choosing something wholesome, a fruit-based alternative to chocolate and cream. The pies tasted sweet and familiar, the turnovers flaked perfectly, and nobody questioned what had been sprayed on the orchards months earlier. But Alar broke down into a compound that researchers linked to cancer, especially in children who consumed apple products at higher rates relative to their body weight. When the findings became public, panic swept through households and school cafeterias across the country. Regulators banned Alar, growers switched to alternative methods, and fast food apple products were reformulated without the controversial chemical. The scare reshaped how parents thought about processed fruit and left a lasting mark on food safety awareness. Coal tar dyes colored the pickles, relishes, and specialty sauces served at fast food restaurants during the 1970s, giving condiments that vibrant artificial brightness that made them pop against buns and patties. The dyes were cheap, stable, and produced colors that natural ingredients could never match, so manufacturers used them freely. Customers squeezed bright yellow mustard and neon green relish onto their hot dogs without wondering where those intense hues came from. Children were especially drawn to the vivid colors, associating brightness with flavor. But coal tar dyes were derived from petroleum, and researchers began questioning whether ingesting them regularly posed health risks. Studies linked certain dyes to hyperactivity in children, allergic reactions, and potential carcinogenic effects. Regulators responded by banning some dyes outright and requiring stricter testing, forcing food manufacturers to reformulate products that had relied on artificial color for decades. Today, many fast food chains advertise natural colorings, a shift driven by consumer demand that traces directly back to concerns about the petroleum-based dyes that once seemed harmless. Lard-based pie crusts dominated the dessert menus of fast food restaurants during the 1970s, giving cherry pies, apple turnovers, and fried fruit pastries that flaky, tender texture customers craved. Rendered pig fat was the baking industry's secret weapon, producing crusts that shattered perfectly with each bite and held fillings without getting soggy. Restaurants fried pies in the same lard, doubling down on a flavor profile that felt rich, satisfying, and undeniably delicious. Families finished meals with these treats, not realizing they were consuming significant amounts of saturated fat in a single dessert. The crusts were golden, the fillings were sweet, and the whole experience felt like a reward after a long day. But as research connected saturated fat to heart disease, lard fell out of favor across the food industry. Fast food chains switched to vegetable shortenings and eventually to formulations designed to reduce trans fats as well. The original lard-crusted pies disappeared from menus, replaced by versions that tasted different enough for longtime customers to notice. Today, those rich, flaky pastries exist only in memory and occasional nostalgic recreations. Formaldehyde residue and maple-flavored pancake syrup lingered on breakfast platters served at fast food restaurants during the 1970s, a byproduct of processing methods that prioritized shelf stability. The artificial syrups used at most chains contained no real maple at all, relying instead on corn syrup, artificial flavors, and preservatives that extended shelf life indefinitely. Some formulations included trace amounts of formaldehyde as a preservative, a practice that seems shocking today, but raised few eyebrows then. Families poured the thick, amber liquid over pancakes, waffles, and French toast sticks, watching it pool in styrofoam containers. Kids loved the sweetness, parents appreciated the convenience, and nobody read ingredient labels that would have revealed the chemical complexity hidden behind the simple word syrup. When regulators tightened restrictions on preservatives in food products, formaldehyde disappeared from ingredient lists, replaced by safer alternatives. The breakfast syrups served today bear little resemblance to the chemical-laden versions of the 70s, though the artificial maple flavor remains largely unchanged. Asbestos insulation near pizza ovens lined the walls and ceilings of fast food kitchens throughout the 1970s, protecting structures from the intense heat behind every cooking station. Restaurant owners trusted the material because it was fireproof, affordable, and recommended by contractors who had used it for decades. Workers stood inches away during every shift, flipping dough, sliding pies into ovens, and breathing air that circulated past fibers nobody could see. The kitchen stayed cool, the ovens performed reliably, and nobody questioned what the insulation might be releasing. But asbestos fibers do not stay locked in place forever. As materials aged or were disturbed during repairs, microscopic particles drifted into kitchen air and settled on surfaces where food was prepared. When researchers linked asbestos exposure to lung disease and cancer, the material was banned from new construction and required to be removed. Fast food kitchens were gutted and rebuilt with safer alternatives, but the workers who spent years breathing that contaminated air often discovered the damage far too late. DDT-contaminated beef patties reached fast food grills during the 1970s because the pesticide had soaked into the entire agricultural food chain before anyone understood the consequences. Cattle grazed on pastures that had been sprayed, drank from streams that carried runoff, and ate feed crops treated with chemicals designed to eliminate insects at any cost. The residue accumulated in animal fat, concentrating as it moved up the food chain until it arrived on restaurant grills in the form of ground beef. Customers bit into burgers without knowing that traces of a banned pesticide were embedded in every bite. DDT had already been linked to environmental devastation and health risks, but clearing it from the food supply took years after the official ban. Regulators tightened testing requirements, farmers switched to alternative pest control, and the beef industry slowly worked to eliminate contamination that had built up over decades. Today, the burgers served at fast food restaurants are monitored far more carefully, though the memory of that invisible contamination lingers in food safety discussions. Mercury thermometers in walk-in freezers hung on hooks and sat on shelves throughout fast food kitchens during the 1970s, used to monitor temperatures that kept ingredients safe. The glass tubes filled with silvery liquid seemed reliable, precise, and perfectly suited for the job. Workers checked them constantly, tapping the glass to read the tiny numbers and recording temperatures on clipboards. But mercury thermometers break, and when they shattered inside freezers filled with food, the toxic metal scattered across surfaces that would later touch ingredients destined for customer trays. Cleanup was often casual, with workers sweeping up visible glass and wiping down shelves without understanding that mercury vapor lingered invisibly in cold air. The contamination risk extended to anyone who ate food stored near a broken thermometer. When digital alternatives became affordable and regulators pushed for safer monitoring tools, mercury thermometers disappeared from commercial kitchens. Today, the idea of toxic metal hanging inches from frozen burger patties feels reckless, though it was once standard practice. Diacetyl butter flavoring spray coated popcorn, biscuits, and baked goods in fast food kitchens throughout the 1970s, giving everything that rich, buttery taste customers craved without real dairy. Workers grabbed aerosol cans and sprayed the chemical mist directly onto hot surfaces, watching it sizzle and absorb into whatever it touched. The smell was intoxicating, filling kitchens with an aroma that seemed wholesome and appetizing. Customers never questioned how the butter flavor got there because the taste matched their expectations perfectly. But diacetyl vapor is dangerous when inhaled repeatedly, and workers who used the spray daily were breathing in a compound later linked to serious lung disease. Popcorn factory workers developed a condition so severe it became known as popcorn lung, and the connection to butter flavoring eventually reached fast food kitchens. Regulators stepped in with exposure limits and ventilation requirements that transformed how artificial butter flavoring could be applied. The casual spraying that once defined kitchen prep work became a regulated process with protective equipment and strict monitoring. Unlimited free refill soda bars with unmonitored syrup lines invited customers to pour their own drinks throughout the 1970s, offering a generous perk that kept families coming back for more. The machines hummed constantly, mixing carbonated water with flavored syrups that flowed through plastic tubing hidden behind dispenser panels. Customers pressed buttons dozens of times per hour, filling cups that ranged from modest to absurdly oversized. Nobody thought about what was growing inside those lines, how often the nozzles were cleaned, or whether the syrup met any health standard. But warm, sugary liquid sitting in plastic tubes creates ideal conditions for bacteria and mold, and health inspectors eventually discovered contamination levels that shocked regulators. Outbreaks traced back to soda fountains forced the industry to implement cleaning schedules, replacement protocols, and monitoring systems that transformed self-serve stations entirely. Today, the carefree refill culture continues, but the machinery operates under strict standards that did not exist when your parents were filling their cups. Right out of the humble neighborhoods of the Midwest, specifically Mankato, Minnesota, Happy Chef, which first debuted in 1963, became known for its classic American diner fare, which included a lot of recognizable breakfast dishes and burgers. It also took some notes out of McDonald's playbook, as each location had this really eye-catching statue of the restaurant's mascot, which was a smiling, well, happy chef. The statue would be holding a spoon and a menu board, and some of those statues even spoke to customers, making it really popular with children. At its peak, it was around 60 locations strong, and those were more or less primarily in Minnesota and the neighboring states, but what it aimed to do, it did well. It had a regional grip that competitors couldn't shake off, and that gave a lot of other restaurants down the road the idea of having strong fan bases with your local regional communities rather than trying to capture a nationwide audience. Beef and veal arrived on dinner tables across the country during the 1980s without anyone suspecting the danger hidden inside every tender bite. Diethylstilbestrol was a synthetic hormone implanted in cattle to accelerate growth, helping animals bulk up faster and reach market weight with less feed. Ranchers loved the efficiency, and consumers enjoyed lower prices without questioning how those savings were achieved. Families grilled steaks, roasted roasts, and served veal cutlets, believing they were providing wholesome protein. But DES had a horrifying history that should have raised alarms, because the same hormone given to pregnant women to prevent miscarriage caused devastating cancers in their children decades later. When researchers connected DES residues in meat to similar risks, shockwaves hit the agricultural industry. Regulators banned the hormone from livestock production, but damage to public confidence was immense. People looked at their freezers filled with beef and wondered what they had already consumed. It remains one of the clearest examples of how shortcuts in food production can carry consequences lasting for generations. Cheese dip was pure 1970s holiday magic in a bowl. It was smooth, salty, and full of personality, everything a crowd pleaser needed to be. Made from a brick of processed cheese and a jar of salsa or canned tomatoes, it was simple enough for anyone to make. It was the first thing to disappear at family gatherings, as kids crowded around with crackers and potato chips in hand. Someone always burned their tongue trying to taste it too soon, unable to wait for it to cool. The bright yellow color practically glowed under fluorescent lights, a symbol of celebration even in small homes. You tossed it in a slow cooker, let it melt, and suddenly you had something that felt like a party. It was the dish that said, "We might not have much, but we still know how to celebrate." The warm, gooey cheese clung to every cracker and chip, turning even the cheapest snacks into something special. Friends gathered around it, dipping, laughing, and wiping orange smudges on napkins. It was the kind of appetizer that brought people together before dinner even began. Velveeta was cheap, dependable, and always on the shelf, which made it the perfect ingredient for a decade that valued convenience. It was a small indulgence in a time when every bite mattered, and for many families, that yellow bowl of cheese dip was the holiday spirit, melty, messy, and full of joy. Vienna sauce was the sweet solution for families who loved homemade candy but could not afford the cocoa powder that fancier recipes demanded. In the 1970s, a jar of peanut butter, a bag of powdered sugar, and a stick of butter could become a platter of creamy, rich squares that tasted like something far more expensive. Mothers mixed the ingredients by hand, pressing the thick dough into pans lined with wax paper and cutting perfect pieces once everything had set. The flavor was intense, nutty, and sweet, the kind of treat that stuck to the roof of your mouth and made you reach for a glass of milk. Children helped roll the fudge into balls, press fork patterns into the tops, or sprinkle crushed peanuts over the surface for extra crunch. The recipe required no stove, no candy thermometer, and no special skills, which made it perfect for kitchens where time and money were always stretched thin. Neighbors received these squares wrapped in cellophane and tied with curling ribbon, never guessing that the gift cost almost nothing to make. Peanut butter fudge was proof that holiday sweetness did not require expensive ingredients, just creativity, patience, and love. Bread pudding made from stale loaves. Burger Chef was changing the script as far as flipping hamburgers went. Howard Johnson's was making waves even earlier in the 1920s and revolutionizing how ice cream stands worked in America. It was a humble stand that started in Massachusetts, and it ended up growing into a synonym for roadside dining eventually throughout America. It became known for its family-friendly menus, which expanded far past just ice cream. When I tell you there was a Howard Johnson everywhere, please believe me, because I mean absolutely nowhere was safe from Johnson. I'm talking about interstates, every other main road, near subways, but there was one location where they were most popular, and that was highways. Their joints also had this infectiously charming appeal to them with those bright orange roofs that were so recognizable. They were one of the first places to set a standard for fast food that the rest of America would follow, and they still stuck true to their roots by serving some pretty good ice cream. Howard Johnson focused on becoming a recognizable brand that families could trust, and their entire business model was being a source of some great food, even around places like the highway. Swordfish and tuna were prized catches on dinner tables throughout the 1980s, served as elegant steaks at restaurants and sliced into sandwiches for everyday lunches. These large, predatory fish were celebrated for their firm texture, rich flavor, and reputation as healthy protein sources loaded with omega fatty acids. Families ordered them proudly at seafood counters, grilled them at backyard barbecues, and packed tuna salad into lunchboxes without any hesitation. The ocean seemed like an endless source of pure, natural food, untouched by the contamination problems plaguing land-based agriculture. But mercury accumulates in fish that eat smaller fish, concentrating as it moves up the food chain until top predators carry levels dangerous to human health. Pregnant women, children, and frequent consumers were especially vulnerable to neurological damage that could take years to manifest. When testing revealed how contaminated these popular fish had become, regulators issued consumption advisories that shocked families who thought they were eating healthy. Today, strict warnings limit how often these fish should appear on anyone's plate. Hexed stuffing mix was one of the greatest holiday inventions for the working-class kitchen. Before it, stuffing required hours of baking bread, chopping vegetables, and using precious butter. But in the 1970s, a cardboard box with dried cubes and powdered seasoning could deliver that same aroma in minutes. The smell alone could make any small apartment kitchen feel like a feast, even if there was little else cooking. Children would peek over the stove, watching the steam rise as the water mixed with the herbs and breadcrumbs, filling the air with warmth and memory. It was the kind of scent that lingered long after dinner ended, like comfort baked into the walls. All it took was water, maybe a dab of margarine if you had it, and the magic was done. It smelled like sage, onion, and nostalgia. Families poured it into casseroles or used it to fill out plates next to turkey loaf or Spam. Some added a few diced apples or celery to make it special, while others stretched it with extra bread to feed more mouths. The best part was how it brought everyone together, because even though it was cheap, it tasted rich. Boxed stuffing became a symbol of the era's ingenuity. Simple ingredients, little effort, and maximum comfort. Every spoonful carried the flavor of holidays made from determination and love, proving that even a box could hold a bit of Christmas spirit. Instant mashed potatoes were the cookies in homes where the baking budget could not stretch to cover flour, eggs, and decorations that fancier recipes required. In the 1970s, a box of puffed rice cereal, a bag of marshmallows, and a few tablespoons of margarine could become an entire tray of sweet, crunchy squares that children devoured faster than any decorated sugar cookie. Mothers melted the marshmallows in large pots, stirred in the cereal until every piece was coated, and pressed the sticky mixture into greased pans while it was still warm. The treats required no oven, no rising time, and almost no cleanup, which made them perfect for overwhelmed holiday kitchens. Some families pressed red and green sprinkles into the surface, others drizzled melted chocolate over the top, and a few cut them into Christmas tree shapes using cookie cutters. The treats appeared on cookie platters beside more elaborate confections, and nobody treated them as lesser. They were proof that celebration did not require expense, just creativity and the willingness to make something sweet from whatever was already in the cupboard. Instant mashed potato flakes appeared. Wag's was this 24-hour diner-style restaurant chain that ended up being owned by Walgreens and was supposedly made as a competitor to Denny's and IHOP. Naturally, you can expect what that means. Breakfast menus filled with sandwiches, burgers, pancakes, just comfort food galore. Wal's main customer base was also something I'm sure you can guess, because any good IHOP competitor needs to have a lot of incentive for families to come and visit. It was also really popular with travelers, and Wag's captured a market that those places couldn't. Since it was 24 hours, late-night diners and people trekking through the states would end up relying on it a lot. And I mean more than just the odd road hiker or two passing by. Wag's was also really convenient, since Walgreens was pretty smart with placement. A lot of Wag's outlets were near or inside Walgreens stores, so it kind of worked as a team, with customers of Wag checking out Walgreens and customers of Walgreens getting curious about Wag. It was one of the first places to introduce the concept of a 24-hour diner, and it was pretty successful at it. VIPs ended up being a sodium cyclamate. Sweetened drinks were everywhere in the 1980s, filling refrigerators and vending machines with diet sodas that promised guilt-free refreshment. The artificial sweetener tasted remarkably close to sugar, lacked the bitter aftertaste of alternatives, and helped calorie-conscious consumers enjoy drinks without weight gain associated with regular soda. Families stocked cases of these beverages, and dieters relied on them as essential tools in weight management. The sweeteners seemed like a perfect solution to growing concerns about sugar and obesity. But cyclamate had already been banned in the United States back in 1969 after studies linked it to bladder cancer in laboratory animals. Despite ongoing debates about those findings, the ban remained firmly in place. Many consumers had no idea they were consuming something prohibited when they purchased imported products or traveled abroad. The controversy highlighted how differently nations approached food safety. Today, cyclamate remains forbidden in the United States, a quiet reminder that what tastes sweet can sometimes carry bitter consequences. Brahmin was the quiet hero of holiday dinners for families who had to make every dollar count. It was cheap, filling, and surprisingly comforting, a creamy combination of pantry staples that made even tough times feel a little softer. A can of tuna, a can of cream of mushroom soup, some egg noodles, and a sprinkle of breadcrumbs were all you needed to turn an empty table into a small feast. The smell of it baking, warm, savory, and slightly salty, was enough to make any kitchen feel like home. For many, it stood in for the ham or turkey they could not afford, and no one complained. The crunchy topping, made from whatever was on hand, saltines, cornflakes, or stale bread, added the perfect contrast to the creamy base. Kids picked out the peas, parents ignored the complaints, and everyone ate until the pan was scraped clean. Tuna casserole was not glamorous, but it was dependable. It showed up year after year, proof that resourcefulness could taste like comfort. And when leftovers were served the next day, reheated in a well-worn dish, it tasted even better, like pride disguised as dinner. Canned cranberry sauce was one of those. Punch served as the holiday drink in countless homes where real fruit juice or sparkling cider felt like an impossible luxury. In the 1970s, a few packets of powdered drink mix, a cup of sugar, and a pitcher of cold water could transform any gathering into something that felt festive and bright. Mothers mixed the punch in giant bowls, sometimes adding ginger ale for fizz or canned pineapple juice for a tropical twist that made the drink feel fancier than its price tag suggested. Children lined up with paper cups, eyes wide at the brilliant reds, purples, and oranges that seemed to glow under the kitchen lights. The sweetness was intense, the colors were impossible, and nobody cared that it came from a packet instead of a fruit tree. Some families froze the punch into ice rings studded with maraschino cherries, creating centerpieces that floated in the bowl like edible decorations. Others served it warm, spiked with cinnamon sticks and cloves, pretending it was something closer to mulled cider. The drink was never about authenticity. It was about celebration, about making a holiday feel complete even when the budget said otherwise. I said White Tower copied and got into some franchising issues with? Well, meet the very first to do it, White Castle. First founded in 1921 in Wichita, Kansas, by two men, Billy Ingram and Walter Anderson, White Castle was an innovator, and I don't think there was ever a more appropriate use of the word in this entire list. It was known as the first fast food hamburger chain in the United States, period. It also came up with small, square burgers instead of what we typically are used to, and these would later on be called sliders in today's day and age. White Castle wasn't just known for its White Castle-like architecture, which became a huge crux of its branding. It was also known for its really unique method of preparation. The burgers were made with onions and had holes in the patties, and this ensured that the patty was made evenly. The chain was one of the first fast food joints to have standardized food preparation and assembly line techniques, as well as an impeccable standard for hygiene. All in all, it was everything that fast food places today aren't, but a lot of places tried to follow its example back then because this place set the template of fast, convenient, clean, and easy food. White Castle became known for efficiency, simplicity, and a lot of good food. Nitrite-cured meats without safety limits filled deli counters and refrigerators throughout the 1980s, from sliced ham and bacon to hot dogs and bologna that children devoured without question. The preservatives kept meat looking pink and appetizing while preventing bacterial growth that could cause food poisoning. Families packed sandwiches for school lunches, served platters at gatherings, and fried bacon every weekend morning, believing they were enjoying simple, satisfying food. The smell alone made mouths water and kitchens feel like home. But nitrites react with proteins during cooking and digestion to form nitrosamines, compounds that researchers link to stomach cancer and other diseases. Studies showed that heavy consumption of processed meats carried real health consequences, especially for children whose smaller bodies absorbed higher relative doses. Regulators eventually imposed strict limits on nitrite levels and required manufacturers to add compounds that inhibit nitrosamine formation. The beloved deli meats of the past now carry warning labels. It is unsettling to realize that sandwiches packed with love once carried risks nobody thought to mention. Biscuits were one of the easiest ways to make a holiday meal feel like a feast. That yellow box was a miracle worker for families on tight budgets. With just water or milk, anyone could bake fluffy, buttery biscuits that tasted homemade. The dough came together in minutes, thick and sticky under calloused hands that had made it 100 times before. The smell of them baking filled even the smallest kitchens with warmth, masking the chill that came from drafty walls or tight finances. When the tray came out of the oven, those golden biscuits looked like celebration itself. Simple, hot, and perfect. Fresh bread was expensive, but biscuit gave people a way to fill baskets with warm, golden rolls for pennies. The smell alone made any kitchen feel like Christmas. Many kids grew up remembering those biscuits more fondly than the meal itself, soft, flaky, and dripping with margarine or syrup. For mothers, it was a point of pride that something so cheap could feel so comforting. Some even used the mix to make dumplings or shortcakes when dessert ingredients ran low. It was the kind of invention that kept people fed and spirits high. The 1970s were about making do, and biscuit turned that into an art form. Budget meatloaf at countless modest Christmas dinners in the 1970s, offering a shortcut that busy mothers embraced without shame or apology. The box promised fluffy, creamy potatoes in minutes, and for families who could not afford the time or the pounds of fresh potatoes that fancier recipes demanded, the promise felt like a small miracle. Mothers boiled water, stirred in the flakes, added a pat of margarine and a splash of milk, and watched the powder transform into something that looked remarkably close to the real thing. Children never complained because the texture was smooth, the flavor was mild, and the mashed potatoes arrived on their plates still steaming alongside whatever main dish the family could afford. Some mothers added garlic powder, others stirred in shredded cheese, and a few topped the mound with a pool of gravy that hid any hint of the shortcut beneath. The flakes saved hours of peeling, boiling, and mashing, which meant more time for decorating, wrapping, and simply being together. Nobody at the table ever asked whether the potatoes were real, because in that moment they tasted like home, and that was all that mattered. Family this, family-oriented that. If you really want to talk about a restaurant that played that game better than anybody else, you can really only mention Antoine's. From the streets of New Orleans, Louisiana. Also, stop for a second. Remember how I said Parker's was only the second oldest restaurant? Let me introduce you to the founding date of Antoine's, which is literally 1840. By the way, this place was still up and running by the mid-20th century. So yeah, just let that sink in for a bit. It wasn't known for how long of a life it lived, though. It was known for Antoine Alciatore's famous decision to include classic Creole cuisine, which at the time, and even well into the 20th century, nobody else was doing. If they were, they definitely were not doing it on the same scale as Antoine's was. It had multiple dining rooms, and each of them had its own unique aesthetic and deco. And they were very often used for private dining and even parties. It was known as a place for the affluent and the rich to come and live it up, and it had an extensive wine cellar. A lot of qualities that you haven't heard so far, because we've mostly dealt with restaurants specializing in family-friendly food and classic American fast food staples. Antoine's was the biggest proponent of Creole culture, fine eating, good wine, and an extreme focus on carrying your cultural identity into your product, a format that a lot of restaurants are even today trying to nail down perfectly. Sulfite preserved restaurant salad bars were the crown jewels of casual dining in the 1980s. Those long, gleaming counters overflowing with crisp lettuce, vegetables, and toppings that seemed impossibly fresh. Families lined up with plates in hand, thrilled by endless variety and the illusion of healthy eating. What diners did not realize was that many restaurants sprayed produce with sulfite solutions to keep everything looking vibrant long past its natural shelf life. The chemicals stopped browning and allowed vegetables to sit under heat lamps for hours without wilting. It seemed like a miracle of food science. But sulfites triggered severe reactions in certain people, especially those with asthma, causing breathing difficulties and, in tragic cases, death. Reports of allergic emergencies mounted until regulators could no longer ignore the pattern. The FDA banned sulfite sprays on fresh fruits and vegetables served raw, forcing restaurants to rethink salad bar practices entirely. That gleaming buffet of the past carries a shadow most people never knew existed, a reminder that freshness can sometimes be a dangerous illusion. Red dye pineapple bake might sound unusual now, but in the 1970s, it was a beloved centerpiece of thrift and creativity. Spam was cheap, filling, and packed with enough salt to make anything taste satisfying. With just a few canned pineapple rings and a drizzle of brown sugar or honey, it turned into a sweet and savory dish that looked far fancier than it cost. Mothers called it poor man's ham, but they served it proudly, often on vintage Pyrex plates that had seen many holidays. The golden caramelized edges, the warm syrup scent, and that hint of tangy pineapple all made it feel festive, even if it came straight from the pantry. For kids, it was delicious comfort food, sticky, smoky, and oddly satisfying. Many families kept Spam as a standby, knowing it could transform into a holiday meal at a moment's notice. It might not have been carved at the head of the table, but it brought the same joy and laughter. In a decade defined by practicality and perseverance, this dish symbolized what made the 1970s kitchen so special: the ability to turn little into plenty. The Cambodia salad with Cool Whip appeared at holiday gatherings as the fluffy pastel cloud that everyone recognized but nobody could quite define. In the 1970s, this dish required little more than a tub of whipped topping, a can of mandarin oranges, a can of crushed pineapple, a bag of mini marshmallows, and a generous handful of sweetened coconut flakes. Mothers folded everything together in large mixing bowls, creating a dessert that looked like something between a fruit salad and a dream. Children loved the sweetness, the colors, and the way the marshmallows softened overnight into pillowy bites that melted on the tongue. Some families added maraschino cherries for extra brightness. Others stirred in chopped pecans for crunch, and a few mixed in sour cream to balance the sugar. The dish required no cooking, no baking, and almost no skill, which made it perfect for busy kitchens where time was as precious as money. Ambrosia appeared at church potlucks, family reunions, and holiday buffets, always vanishing faster than anyone expected. It was never fancy, never complicated, and never apologized for being exactly what it was: pure, simple, affordable joy. SOS, which stood for Cream. White Tower was a fast food chain that was founded in 1926, and it copied what was known as White Castle, which was another big name in the burger-making industry. They were known for these small white burgers, and they expanded heavily throughout the 20s and 30s. What they were known for most was that lightning-quick service. I mean, seriously, I don't know what the hourly rate was back then for the service industry, but theirs must have been the best in the market, or at least pretty competitive, since those workers did their job like men possessed. You ever seen somebody move like Sonic the Hedgehog flipping hamburgers? A marathon, sure, but hamburgers? It's insane how different the work ethic used to be back then. Well, at least you could get paid fairly, so that's something. White Tower was known for having pretty good employee retention too, and it was one of the first chains to do a lot of things besides just set a standard in how you should treat your employees. It was extremely recognizable. Remember how I just talked about how Bob's Big Boy had its own air and personality that made it stand out? White Tower was really similar to that in that regard, and that's why no matter what the location was, it was always easily recognizable. Although maybe it was a bit too easy on the eyes, because people eventually compared it to another fast food chain, White Castle, and it even got into legal battles with them over how similar their product and architecture were. Guess you always should change up the homework you copy a bit more to be on the safe side, right? Number 3 colored the candies, cereals, and desserts of the 1980s in shades of bright cherry and festive pink that children adored without hesitation. It made maraschino cherries glow atop ice cream sundaes, turned fruit snacks into jewel-toned treats, and gave holiday cookies their signature festive look. Parents bought these products without a second thought, assuming anything sold on grocery shelves must be safe. But researchers discovered something troubling when laboratory studies connected the dye to thyroid tumors in animals, raising alarm about what it might do inside human bodies. The FDA banned red dye number 3 from cosmetics, yet the additive lingered in certain foods under older approvals that seemed impossible to untangle. Families who remembered eating handfuls of those bright red candies began questioning what else slipped past safety checks. The controversy sparked lasting debates about artificial colors in the food supply. Looking back, those vivid reds and pinks carry a complicated legacy, a symbol of an era when color mattered more than caution and danger hid behind cheerful packaging. Raw milk sold openly in Graham was the unsung hero of countless 1970s holiday tables. When money was tight and a trip to the butcher was out of the question, that shiny tin of ham became a small luxury. It was cheap, easy to find, and could sit in a cupboard for months, ready to make any meal feel special. Families would pull it out on Christmas Eve or Thanksgiving and slice it thin to make it stretch farther. The salty, smoky flavor filled kitchens with that familiar holiday scent, even if it came from a can instead of an oven. Some brushed it with brown sugar or honey to give it that glossy finish, while others decorated it with pineapple rings and cloves to make it look fancy. Despite the low cost, it carried a sense of pride, proof that even a small budget could still bring people together around a warm meal. Parents taught their kids that it was not about what you could afford, but how much care you put into it. And somehow, the simple act of carving that canned ham made it feel like a celebration. It may not have been a spiral-cut roast, but for many, it tasted like home. Turkey loaf was the thrifty dessert that turned yesterday's leftovers into something warm, custardy, and surprisingly elegant. In the 1970s, no family with tight finances ever threw away bread that had gone slightly hard because every slice could be reborn in a baking dish filled with eggs, milk, sugar, and a generous pour of vanilla. Mothers tore the bread into rough chunks, soaked them in the custard mixture, and baked everything until the top turned golden and the edges crisped into caramelized perfection. The kitchen filled with a fragrance that smelled like holidays, comfort, and home all at once. Some families stirred in raisins, others added cinnamon and nutmeg, and a few drizzled warm vanilla sauce over each serving to make the dish feel even more special. Children scraped their bowls clean, unaware that the dessert had started as something most people would have discarded. Bread pudding carried no shame in its origins, only pride in its transformation. It was a dish that honored the past while celebrating the present, a reminder that nothing should ever be wasted when love and heat could turn the ordinary into something extraordinary. Before you go, tell us in the comments which banned fast food item shocked you most. Tap like if this trip through forgotten menus stirred a memory, and subscribe so you never miss the next deep dive into the foods we thought were safe.